The Day the Sun Came Out by Dorothy Johnson. We left the home place behind, mile by slow mile. We were heading for the mountains, across the prairie where the wind blew forever. At first there were 4 of us, with the 1-horse wagon and its skimpy load. Pa and I walked, because I was a big boy of 11. My 2 little sisters walked until they got tired. Then they had to be boosted up into the wagon bed. That was no covered Conestoga like Pa's folks came west in. It was just an old farm wagon, drawn by 1 tired horse. It creaked and rumbled westward to the mountains toward the little woods town where Pa thought he had an old uncle who owned a little 2-bit sawmill. 2 weeks we'd been moving when we picked up Mary. She'd run away from somewhere that she wouldn't tell. Pa didn't want her along, but she stood up to him with no fear in her voice. I'd rather go with a family and look after kids, she said, but I ain't going back. If you won't take me, I'll travel with any wagon that will. Pa scowled at her, and wide blue eyes stared back. How old are you? He demanded. 20, she said. There's teamsters come this way sometimes. I'd rather go with you folks, but I won't go back. We're purred near out of food, my father told her. We're clean out of money. I got all I can handle without taking anybody else. He turned away as if he hated the sight of her. You'll have to walk, he said. So she went along with us. She looked after the little girls, but Pa wouldn't talk to her. On the prairie, the wind blew, but in the mountains, it was rain. When we stopped at little timber claims along the way, the homesteaders said it had rained all summer. The crops among the blackened stumps were rotted and spoiled. There was no cheer anywhere. The people we talked to were past worrying. They were scared and desperate. So was Pa. He traveled twice as far each day as the wagon. He ranged through the woods with his rifle, but he never saw game. He had been depending on killing a deer, but we never got any deer meat except as a grudging gift from the homesteaders. He brought in a porcupine once, and that was fat meat and good. Mary roasted it in chunks over the fire, half crying with the smoke. Pa and I had rigged up the tarp sheet for our shelter to keep the rain from putting the fire clean out. The porcupine was long gone, except for some of the dried out fat that Mary had saved. When we came to an old empty cabin, Pa said we'd have to stop. The horse was wore out. It couldn't pull any more up those hills in the mountains. At the cabin, at least there was a place to stay. We had a few potatoes left and some cornmeal. There was a creek that probably had fish in it if a person could catch them. Pa tried it for half a day before he gave up. To this day, I don't care for fishing. I remember my father's sunken, sad eyes in his sad face. He took Mary and me outside the cabin to talk. Rain dripped on us from branches overhead. I think I know where we are, he said. I figure to get to Old John's and back in about 4 days. There'll be food in town, and they'll let me have some, whether Old John's still there or not. He looked at me. You do like she tells you, he warned. It was the first time he had admitted Mary was on Earth since we'd picked her up 2 weeks before. You're my pardner, he said. But it might be she's got more brains. You mind what she says. He burst out with bitterness. There ain't anything good left in this world or people to care if you live or die. But I'll get food in the town and I'll come back with it. He took a deep breath and added, if you get too all-fired hungry, Butcher the horse. It'll be better than starving." He kissed the little girls goodbye. Then he plodded off through the woods with one blanket and the rifle. The cabin was moldy and had no floor. We kept a fire going under a hole in the roof, so it was full of blinding smoke, but we had to keep the fire so as to dry out the wood. The third night, we lost the horse. A bear scared him, and we heard the racket. Mary and I ran out, but we couldn't see anything in the pitch dark. In the gray daylight, I went looking for him. I must have walked 15 miles. It seemed like I had to have that horse at the cabin when Pa came, or he'd whip me. I got plumb lost 2 or 3 times. I thought maybe I was going to die there, alone, and nobody would ever know. But I found the way back to the clearing. That was the 4th day, and Pa didn't come. That was the day we ate up the last of the grub. The 5th day, Mary went looking for the horse. My sisters cried. They huddled in a blanket by the fire because they were scared and hungry. I never did get dried out, always having to bring in more damp wood and going out to yell to see if Mary would hear me and not get lost. But I couldn't cry like the little girls did, because I was a big boy, 11 years old. It was near dark when there was an answer to my yelling. Mary came into the clearing. Mary didn't have the horse. We never saw hide nor hair of that old horse again. But she was carrying something big and white that looked like a pumpkin with no color to it. She didn't say anything, just looked around and saw Pa wasn't there yet at the end of the 5th day. "What's that thing?" my sister Elizabeth demanded. "Mushroom," Mary answered. "I bet it hefts 10 pounds. "What are you going to do with it now?" I said. "Play football here?" "Eat it, maybe," she said, putting it in a corner. Her wet hair hung over her shoulders. She huddled by the fire. My sister Sarah began to cry again. "I'm hungry," she kept saying. "Mushrooms ain't good eating," I said. "They can kill you." "Maybe," Mary answered. "Maybe they can. I don't set up to know all about everything, like some people." "What's that mark on your shoulder?" I asked her. "You tore your dress on the brush." "What do you think it is?" she said. Her head was bowed in the smoke. "Looks like scars," I guessed. "'Tis scars. They whipped me, them I used to live with. Now mind your own business. I want to think." Elizabeth cried. "Why won't Pa come back?" "He's coming," Mary promised. "Can't come in the dark. Your Pa'll take care of you soon as he can." She got up and looked around the grub box. "Nothing there but empty dishes," I growled. "If there was anything, we'd know it." Mary stood up. She was holding the can with the porcupine grease. "I'm going to have something to eat," she said coolly. "You kids can't have any yet, and I don't want any crying, mind." It was a cruel thing, what she did then. She sliced that big solid mushroom and heated grease in a pan. The smell of it brought the little girls out of their bed, but she told them to go back in so fierce a voice that they obeyed. And it cried to break your heart. I didn't cry. I watched her, hating her. I endured the smell of the mushroom frying as long as I could. Then I said, "Give me some." "Tomorrow," Mary answered. "Tomorrow, maybe, but not tonight." She turned to me with a sharp command. "Don't bother me. Just leave me be." She knelt there by the fire and finished frying the slice of mushroom. If I'd had Pa's rifle, I'd have been willing to kill her right then and there. She didn't eat right away. She looked at the brown fried slice for a while and said, "By tomorrow morning, I guess you can tell whether you want any." The girls stared at her as she ate. Sarah was chewing an old leather glove. When Mary crawled into the quilts with them, they moved as far away from her as they could get. I was so scared that my stomach heaved, empty as it was. Mary didn't stay in the quilts long. She took a drink out of the water bucket and sat down by the fire and looked through the smoke at me. She said in a low voice, I don't know how it'll be if it's poison. Just do your best you can with the girls. because your pa will come back, you know. You'd better go to bed. I'm going to sit up. And so would you sit up, if it might be our last night on earth, and the pain of death might seize you at any moment. You would sit up by the smoky fire, wide awake, remembering whatever you had to remember, savoring life. We sat in silence after the girls had gone to sleep. Once I asked, "How long does it take?" "I never heard," she answered. "Don't think about it." I slept after a while with my chin on my chest. Mary's moving brought me wide awake. The black of night was fading. "I guess it's all right," Mary said. "I'd be able to tell by now, wouldn't I?" I answered gruffly, "I don't know." Mary stood in the doorway for a while, looking out at the dripping world as if it was beautiful. Then she fried slices of the mushroom while the little girls danced with anxiety. We feasted, we three, my sisters and I, until Mary ruled, "That'll hold you," and would not cook any more. She didn't touch any of the mushroom herself. That was a strange day in the moldy cabin. Mary laughed and was gay. She told stories, and we played Who's Got the Thimble with a pine cone. In the afternoon, we heard a shout. My sisters and I screamed, and I ran ahead of them across the clearing. The rain had stopped. My father came plunging out of the woods, leading a pack horse. And well, I remember the treasures of food in that pack. He glanced anxiously at us as he tore the ropes that bound the pack. "Where's the other one?" he demanded. Mary came out of the cabin then, walking sedately. As she came toward us, the sun began to shine. My stepmother was a wonderful woman.